At this same time, in Washington, the other group who believed that they had brought down the Soviet Union, the neoconservatives, were also determined to push on with their revolutionary agenda. They were convinced that the Soviet Union was just one of many evil regimes in the world, led by tyrants, that threatened America. Regimes they had to conquer to liberate the world and spread democracy.
We want, down with tyranny. We want free countries. We think that America's better off if we live in a world primarily populated with free countries who have to appeal to their own people for the source of their power and to ratify their decisions. And we think that if the whole world were like that, then we would be much more secure, and that typically we are attacked by tyrants. I think it's America's destiny, because I think America's always going to come under attack from tyrants. So I think that our only choice is whether we're going to win or lose, and when we will fight and under what circumstances. But that we're going to have to fight, that's automatic, because they're going to come after us.
One of the most evil of these tyrants, the neoconservatives decided, was Saddam Hussein. In the 1980s, Saddam had been America's close ally, but in 1990, he invaded Kuwait. The neoconservatives now saw him as a key to pursuing the next stage of their transformation of the world. An American-led coalition had been created by President Bush Sr. to liberate Kuwait. But the neoconservatives, like Paul Wolfowitz, who was Under-Secretary of Defense, wanted to push on to Baghdad and bring about a transformation of the Middle East. It would fulfill America's unique role to defeat evil in the world.
Well,
because they might want to rethink.
Oh, that's not good. Maybe he'll play with the band.
He cracks me up when he's dancing, and he's done it so many times in public. He obviously trying to fit in.
Reason probably, I mean, if you look at Israel, Israel would be in big trouble without Saudi Arabia. So what does that mean? Israel's going to leave? You want Israel to leave? We have a very strong ally in Saudi Arabia. We have an ally that said they did not commit at the top level, the crown prince, the king. They did not commit this atrocity, and it's an atrocity. It's a terrible thing.
Too many OBGYNs aren't able to practice their love with women all across this country.
And in his brief remarks, the president drew a roar from the crowd after putting his foot in his mouth.
You helped our nation celebrate its bicentennial in 1976.
The president's humor came to the rescue.
She gave me a look that only a mother could give a child.
Thank you for holding this awesome speech. Is that Sam Donaldson? Forget it, you're a has-been.
I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
Our enemies are innovative and resourceful, and so are we. They never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and neither do we. I think they misestimated the will and determination of the commander-in-chief, too. A year ago, my approval rating was in the 30s. My nominee for the Supreme Court had just withdrawn, and my vice president had shot someone.
I said to him the other day,
despite Bernard Lewis being an Ashkenazi Jew, most wouldn't see anything Judaic related to this concept, or basically this hand that as of recent decades has successfully managed, this invisible hand that has managed to plant hatred and enmity between Christians and Muslims. However, once you dig deeper and deeper, you'd be astonished to find out that this concept of instigating the largest religions in the world against one another is in fact a messianic concept. that has its origins in the Middle Ages, with the aim to establish a kingdom of Israel.
Ferisch als amol, das gewinn nachlass gehen und sagt tegen ab Birzene aber nos no lohem und danach ist gewinn almenas als soll das geben los ist lohem zu Bnei Israel Yachrise. In Ruf ist aber da Limud Musar, von wann ist nimmt sich die alle Zorres. Was mir verruft sich an der berühmte Hachlote, was hat den Namen von Reish Mem Beis. Weil es kommt aus der Flotte, als sie gewähren Iden, was haben gewollt, haben sich erschrocken vor mal jener Hagoy. Der Nela hat sie gekommen zu der Abstimmung und hat auf sie Leiches gewähren von Kulo, hat sie sich verloren von dem Lachen zu Umeis und hat dann geschrieben an Nusser, was auf der Nusser ist gebeut der ganze Lachen von dem Tag, wenn man Tag gestimmt hat, die Achlotte. Und wie der Rieder ist er noch geblieben, als gewinnt der Bokeher von der ganzen Menschung. Und ist das der, was hat mir nach Seher gewinnt unter dem Nusser. Nur der Bay hat getracht, Asamin Pirush, dem Pirush, dem Sture. Haidochnam ist mit Warte auf Bris Eber. Und mich schämt sich nicht, bei Erzählen nicht Iden. Als Iden sein auf der Ruf mit Warte, und keine Yinon של Achrise, und keine Tikva, und keine Hoffnung. Adur druf wird etwas mal wir sein, wie modern und gleich massiv gewinnt Kammer zu Kammer. A jeder noch geben Allahas Koshu, ist Masmin Allahas Neisov, und was leider von den Jahren von Demolton basiert sich, ist sich miusert jeder Allahas Neisov. A frei Abreißen Stieke von Israel, aber auf dem Nusach mit der Achlotte, was ein Bomamisch wie bald das ist neged hat den mit Chasvisholem nicht entfernt in Dover Borre. Und das nicht auf Duru wird sein, Kirov Alvovis mit eine Yehudi Pleini und eine Yehudi Sheni, eine Yehudi Shlishi. Nur das ist Duru wird beide Sachen sehen.
This led to the establishment of the Zionist movement, which, to be truthful, was just the cherry on top. Most people focus too much on Theodor Herzl, when the origins of this obsession in establishing a state in the Middle East is far much older than him. I'll make a video on that too. Now back to this video. Mr. Bernard Lewis, who, if you did not know, holds Israeli, British and American passports, is not a random political analyst. He is a strategist that worked at the heart of these superpowers, ultimately for the benefit of Israel. This billionaire will leave behind a legacy of being the only one to place a theoretical and scientific mirage upon this messianic strategy. And history will acknowledge that Samuel Huntington further disguised this strategy and relayed it unto the masses in order to justify the ongoing chaos and war around the world and in the Middle East in particular, which by the way is not a natural state of affairs in the world, in case you might have been thinking. The thing about terrorism is that it's never really been an international phenomenon, nor has it always benefited from the portrayal of popular media and Hollywood films on a worldwide scale. What we today call terrorism, probably incorrectly, can take a variety of different forms. A comparison could be made between the terror that came with the expansion of Cromwell's reign during the 17th century in the aftermath of the English Civil War, and the terror that took place when the Wahhabi Bedouins were expanding their mini-state and sacked entire towns in Arabia. Now, at the same time, you can also compare the French Revolution often viewed positively, with their social anarcho-revolutions over the last 100 years. What these seemingly different events, which were all achieved through territorial conquest, what they all have in common is but only one commonality, and that is mass extermination as a means through which they can achieve ideological domination. Their aim was to construct new, modern institutions on the very ruins of traditional societies. The socialist mindset behind these cataclysmic historical events also gave rise to the Haganah, created in the early 1920s, which in turn led to the creation of the Irgun, both of these being Jewish homeland militia terrorist organizations. Basically, they were armed and they were fighting to remove Palestinians, and they eventually, this eventually formed the basis of the IDF, all three having the same purpose: to support and expand Jewish settlements on Palestinian land. It should be noted that there are two types of terrorism. This is something that you should all be aware of. If you observe the events, you can actually tell the difference between the two. There is Wahhabi terrorism, typically directed from the US, whose aim is territorial conquest and the destruction or disintegration of nations. If you don't believe me, just look at Syria and look at Libya, look at Iraq, and then look towards a nation with the most mess on their hands. It's not Russia, it's not Germany, it's the United States. The second type is Zionist terrorism, which aims to divide and provoke. Although it was Great Britain that gave a homeland to the Jewish people after World War I, the Irgun led a violent terrorist campaign against the British in order to remove them from the land. This eventually led to the bombing of the British administrative headquarters in Hotel King David in late July 1946. Oh, and just so you know, the Irgun dressed up as Palestinian Arabs so that the Arabs could be blamed in the aftermath. Guess where else we've seen that? Looking back through history, one cannot but help conclude that this tactic of deception and blaming the other was used again and again by the Israelis, often used as a ploy to drag their allies into the conflict. In 1954, Israeli agents attempted to blow up several American buildings in Egypt just to try and bring the Americans in and try to get them to fight against the Egyptians. In 1967, the Americans avoided getting themselves involved in the Six-Day War, as the Soviet Union was an ally to Syria and Egypt. The Israelis attempted to draw the Americans into the war by attacking a ship, and there's a YouTuber that made a very good video about this. Really graceful, check out her channel.
Hi internet friends.
The USS Liberty. The Israelis attempted to basically brush this off as an attack by the Egyptians in the same way as they had done in 1954. To tell the truth, this pattern can also be seen in the attack at the World Trade Center in 2001, which led the US into permanent conflict in the Middle East, coincidentally going according to plan with Bernard Lewis's concept of the clash of civilizations and the Oded Yinon plan of redrawing the map once more in the Middle East. Before you dismiss me for having these views regarding 9/11, the attacks at the World Trade Center were viewed with suspicion by various politicians, scientists and analysts alike. There were a number of facts emerging from 9/11 that immediately pointed towards the events that occurred in the mid-20th century. The case in point being the bombing at the Hotel King David, initially a false flag, and the false flags that occurred in 1954 and 1967. Now, looking at the evidence highlighting the implication of the Israeli secret services in 9/11, you also have
the fact that 5 Israelis were